Welcome to another episode. Today I'm joined by Tom again, one of the specials of this podcast, and like everybody loves his opinions. And today we're doing something slightly different. So today we're going to talk about the state of Interop, where we'll talk about like high level overview of what's going on in the ecosystem, and then we'll also talk about different trends and go into the weeds of bridging. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks for having me. It's always anytime I talk to someone, I feel like it's about a hit or miss if I'm gonna end up having another conversation with them. But no, yeah, our talk. So thanks for having me back.
But I'm glad that we can keep this going. there's no end to this conversation, and we can have like continuous ones. And they're always about interop because like somehow that's the thread that like connects us.
That's what I mean. We were talking off, recording prior to this. We're in the realm of. I mean, I don't know how much you know other than it, but like, I mean, you put me in the real world, I'm dead, man. I don't know anything. And like, I doesn't mean I only know everything about perimeter. Like, take me outside this computer. I don't know anything, man. Yeah, this is, I mean, you sit here all day. So, it's,
Mhm.
it's a pleasure to, talk outside of like 280 characters as well, too. And like outside of, inline chat, which, we still do a lot with everybody. But, yeah, it's nice to actually try to hash some of this stuff out and summarize and get a kind of our state of affairs.
Cool. I mean, let's get into it. And how are we going to do this? So this is basically state of interop for 2026, right? So going into 2026, what does interop look like today, and what should someone think about when they think about interop? And we have a few pointers, and we'll go into each segment and like talk about it, right? So up first, I think it's super important to put this out that interop adoption has been up and to the right in the last year, like in 2025. And I think, in my opinion, this has happened because of a couple of reasons. Like one was the number of chain launches, right? Like in 2025, there were, I think, 10 high profile chain launches. Like there was Initia, Abstract, Story, Parachain, Plasma, Stable, Monad, Mega ETH. I don't know if it's going to come out in the next few weeks, but the number of chain launches out there, it was a very high number, and all of these chain launches had Interop figured out from day one. So 2024, every time a chain would launch, there would be no bridges, right? Like everybody would be scrambling to get something set up on the last day. But this time around, each team would have like a native bridge set up. They would have connectivity with all of the bridge providers set up from day one. They would issue assets on like Interop token standards. So everything was just so much better.
Yeah, it kind of changed. I think the first one I saw that really made a difference. Well, so there was tons of chain launches this year, right? I mean, it was, and outside of, I think you said like the majors, right? It was probably about a dozen majors
Yeah.
that did like significant volume, significant TVL. But 2024 had its own. I think it was 2024, but like kind of the generation before that, right? The You had Scroll, you had Ink, you
Mhm.
had Blast, you had Sonic, you had these things also did significant volume for the time. And Sonic was the first one that kind of came around, and they have their I think they call it the Phantom Bridge or something, right? But it's Andres. I think it uses like block headers and stuff like that. But they were the first ones that kind of came around and tried to. I think they did use Layer Zero as well too, right? They tried to implement somewhat of their own solution. But prior to that, it was the canonical bridge. That was it, right? And I think that is a time frame. This existed like really strongly for about a year. And I think it was a time frame that really allowed like these quick, fast, intense bridges to begin to thrive because there's no OFTs, right? CCTP didn't exist on any of these chains either, right? It existed on 5 chains at the time. It was send money in from ETH. And a big problem with that was a lot of users didn't have money on ETH. They had money on other
Mhm.
L2s as well, too, right? So I think that was like a big catalyst for allowing all of this to start getting built. And then, yeah, this year, I mean, it was, you were on Layer Zero, Wormhole, one of these things. Your native was an OFT. You could get infinite stable coins over there immediately. Your native asset can be burned and mint. It was a significantly, and this is what you mean. You saw the difference in TVL bridged, right? Something like a Barrett chain and etc. Right? All primarily because of this. I think it's wild in heights. I mean, I remember the scroll canonical. Looking at it, and it was like I don't know, like $3 million, like
Yeah.
pre-launch, like took a couple days pre-launch. I was like, holy, that's all. There's already $3 million sent over there. Wow, right? So yeah, it
And
was.
then Parachain was literally 3 billion. So we've done 100 X's on everything.
And yeah, they did campaigns and stuff, right? But still,
Yeah.
there
But
wasn't.
still. So I
Yeah,
think that was the main realization for me, that Interop is being treated as like day one infrastructure for every
yeah,
new chain and for like every new issuer as well. Like that was the other thing, right? So USDT zero launched in 2025. So I only realized that it launched this year when I was like writing about it. And it just seems like they've been around forever, right? But in 11 months, they've done $50 billion in volume. So I think stable coins and like asset issuance in general, that's now happening on predominantly on interop rails, I would say, like on interop
yeah.
token standards. And obviously, there are three players that come to mind that are like leading this: Layer Zero with OFTs, there's Wormhole, and there's Chainlink. So I think these are the three players that are still uh, around and like still fighting for like all the deal flow, I would say.
Yeah, and I think in a broad stroke, however, I think a year ago, I remember a year ago you wrote this blog post. Remember,
Mhm.
blog post talking about comparing the different token standards between all
Yeah.
these bridges, right? Layer zero, wormhole, Connext, hyperlink, etc. Right? And at that time, like I remember a lot of people reading and talking about it in regards of like debating, right? Debating the merits of all these different solutions. And there wasn't enough activity on any one of them. And there wasn't enough adoption solely in any one of them for it to be like a clear kind of conversational argument of this is the superior solution. And maybe not superior, but mostly winning. Um, I think today, in a general narrative sense, I would feel I just anyway, if anyone asks, I tell them like OFTs won, essentially, right? Just in terms, and yeah, there's exemptions to that, right?
Mhm.
And one-offs and etc. Right? But um, for the most part, it's just the amount of volume that is going through those. Of just about every like big launch this year, you talk about these like dozen big launches, right? Their natives were OFTs. They were OFT permanent with stables, one way or another. Um, and at a certain point, I think that does matter outside of the like the technical merit of the solution, just of you know all this stuff is a giant bug bounty, right? The more money we put into something is a giant, and the longer it survives, the more that thing like should be used, right? Whether it is like good, bad, and different, etc. And like I think like OFTs is like starting to get there. It's just like you want to like you definitely don't want to roll your own. That's terrifying, right? And these other ones, OFTs are just magnitudes larger value secured through it, right? You can argue the security, et cetera, whatnot, but other than that, just can you even name like three other like non like major OFT tokens? Like it's just that's what I tell people today, right?
Though,
Does
so,
that
so the
survive?
thing
I
is,
don't know.
like, I directionally fully agree with you, but I think,
It's directional.
but like, what a lot of people are missing right now. So you talked about the assets being secured by these token standards, right? So I think layer zero OFTs are around $100 billion. But then when you look at Wormhole and Chainlink as well, they have like Wormhole has 100 billion secured as well, and like Chainlink is around 50 billion. So it's not like they're not seeing any adoption, which is why I think like it's important to talk about them, because
Sure.
this is consensus, right? Like obviously OFTs are great. USDT zero is probably the best flag bearer anybody could have asked for. But I do see these two teams up there as well at this point, which is important to mention because, like you said, only 18 months ago when I was writing this blog post, there were like six different players where we were debating like what is the better solution, what is this, what is that. But at this point, a lot of those teams have folded. Like Axelar literally got acquired by someone else recently. So I think it is important to mention that.
Um, it does feel like this is. We argued earlier this year, like, is it solved, right? And like, I don't want to say it's solved, but like, feels like we're in that ball. We're starting to get in that ballpark, right? The second inning of the fourth World Series game or something, maybe. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know what else you do with them, right? We had all these grand ideas, like make all these cool things, and like now we kind of have it.
Yeah, but the only thing I want to put out, because this is like supposed to be high level and even for people outside the interop space, right? So I think a lot of people talk about chains and ecosystems and like the value that they secure. I think between these three players, there's like $250 billion in value secured. I don't think there are many L2s or like chains in general that have the same numbers. And I think it's time that we start looking at these protocols as like literal platforms, because at this point they have more apps and like tokens building on top of them than most of the chains, like most of the chains outside of top five.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, right. Yeah, I mean that's valid. I mean, if you were to have asked me, I would have clearly said layer zero and wormhole, right? But no, Chainlink has actually Chainlink has like good tech in
Mhm.
hardware. But yeah, there was a dozen more you wrote about, man, a year ago, right? Where when's the last time you saw one of those?
they're still there, but like their numbers are not as impressive.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what. So yeah, maybe it's my argument of that earlier of that one kind of captures and like wins, and maybe that is ultimately then three, right? Maybe
Mhm.
that's that solution here, what we end up landing on, right? And they're all different, slightly different for all different needs. Um, However, I feel like a bit of it is still just like political, right? And I don't think that survives in the long run, but who knows?
Mhm. Yeah, we'll find out. But okay, so I think another point at this point, I feel multi-chain behavior is just default, right? I don't even think this is a question anymore, and this ties in directly with the number of chain launches and how the ecosystem has shaped up, right? So I feel like people have their home chains, like they would park their capital on maybe Solana, maybe Ethereum, maybe Base. And then as there are seasons and as there are like narratives and cycles on different chains, people are so used to moving their capital to these chains at this point that bridging has become just another like action, like swapping, right? Okay, like there's a BNB season. Okay, I'm gonna bridge. I'm gonna like park my capital there for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I'm gonna have fun, make money, and come back to my home chain. I think that behavior has become default, and because of that, multi-chain and just like bridging has become default for every user.
Yeah, and this is like you'll there used to be a very strong argument from a lot of people, right? And some guys will still kind of make it. And it's just, you can tell they probably aren't just playing these games and aren't doing these things. But people used to hate bridging. They used to tell you this, right?
Mhm.
They were like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to actively boycott it. Like, I want nothing. And then I do feel like, I don't know, at some point in the last 6 months, right, this became, I no longer heard really people talking about it too much, right? And
Mhm.
likely so. I mean, you've been doing it, they've been doing it the whole time, even if they didn't notice it, right? How they get their money is Solana, how they get their money wherever else, right? Um, and that's like the fun, right? Like, you can't just like poof money somewhere. Like, people like think they don't, but at the end of the day, you've always been bridging, whether it's through like centralized exchange, whether it's through like however you've been doing it, but it's the same concept, right? And we finally kind of got bridging to be not as
And
terrifying as it used.
not
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. Like in their defense, right? Yeah, 2 years ago, it was a terrible experience, and one out of every 4 or 5 times, like you have a reverted transaction that disappears for 2 hours. You don't know where your money went, right? Today, today your money lands before like your MetaMask UI updates.
I think bridging today is almost as good as swapping.
Swapping,
I say
yeah.
almost because like there are still edge cases where like it probably takes 3 minutes or like 10 minutes. But in most cases, like I would say 95% of the transfers, things happen within 5 to 10 seconds and like you get your assets on the other chain and you're done with it. And it's the same experience with swapping as well.
I mean, particularly with something like a relay, right? Like swaps and bridging are fundamentally the same thing, in their system,
Exactly.
right? There is no, Peter actually had a good tweet about this, like, I think yesterday, right? About like, they're arguing about like the base bridge or something, volume going through the base
Hmm.
bridge, people,
Hmm.
right? Like in relay with us, right? Like there is no bridging going on when you bridge, right? Like when you say there's bridging, you say there's swapping. There's no okay in relay there is swapping, right? They will swap, but they don't have to, right?
Hmm.
Either they could have inventory and they could just give it to them to their side, right? Some people do this, but like when you bridge today with a lot of these things, what makes it so fast and immediate and that kind of like click is there is no bridge occurring, right? And it's I think that's what actually really started making this, and then I think that forced a lot of the like the protocol type bridges to suddenly not suddenly care, but recognize the value of speed from like a user experience, right?
Hmm.
We used to argue, I remember people arguing, 60 seconds is fast enough, right? And in practicality, I mean, it is, right? Very rarely do you need money, but it's not solving for, I think bridging was never solving for uh, getting the money there in the time that they need it. Bridging ultimately became solving for that what I saw was a huge problem, which is everyone hated doing it. Everyone was terrified of doing it. You actually talk to them. Why did they hate it? Because they were scared, honestly.
Mhm.
Nobody, still today, people don't know how bridges work, but they don't
I
care because
mean,
it's so damn fast.
in
They don't have
intense
time to
played
work.
Intense played a big role with this, right? Like they brought down the times, the fees is lower, and everything is just easier, I would say. And I think another thing that has happened this year, like cross chain volume has actually grown
Mhm.
exponentially, right? So I think last year there were only a few weeks where we were like hitting a few billion in cross chain volume as a space, right? But this year we had some weeks where we were hitting like 10 billion as the cross chain volume space, and it's literally up 10x since 2022. So I think the numbers are now starting to make a lot more sense, and this will only go up because chain launches are increasing, bridging is becoming like normal user behavior, and UX is getting better, right? So there's no reason why cross chain and like same chain swap volumes aren't on the same level a year from now, or like a couple of years from now.
I mean, this is the what I think we always thought was kind of the. I think you were in a similar opinion.
Yeah,
The
we've
reality
been
of what
talking
chain
about this for
abstraction
5 years. Yeah.
Yes. This is like what like chain abstraction, right? You know what? No, chain abstraction is just like, you're going to do a swap. It's going to be a bridge. It's going to maybe like you make it look however you want, right? But it's going to be, you have asset A on chain X and you want asset B on chain Z, right? And like, you're not going to like even think of these as really like different chains, but you are going to know they're different chains, like enough to
Mhm.
the point where you can swap it in your wallet. You can do this. And like, this is like, interchangeable and usable today, right? Like we can do this today with the stuff we have. We don't have to reinvent all these crazy things, right? We don't need to do smart wallets and this, etc. But yeah, that's what I think. Like chain abstraction is making bridging better, if not as good as, if not better than Uniswap. As
Mhm.
soon as you do that, like I don't think it matters that like you have to like change the chain. Like, what do you mean you have to change the asset? What do you mean? Like you do this in the real world, right? This is always my argument, right? I have money in my bank account and like I need it in PayPal, right? I don't like have these things merged and like whatever. I'm just like, oh yeah, I gotta like go to PayPal and hit, like deposit money in or whatever. It's just it is what it feels pretty natural to me, right? Um, and I think the part that a lot of that thesis in the counter missed was people really didn't like bridging because they didn't know what was happening. It took a long time, and half the time they like kind of lost their money for a bit. And they were just like, I hate this thing, right? Like I
They
never want to touch
actually
it.
did, if you think about it. Like there was a period of time, and there are some designs that actually take funds from the users, and you have to
Yeah,
trust them.
yeah. Well, what do you mean? There's some decentralized messaging protocols with robust, large validation networks that, oh no, what happened? Poof, there goes $100 billion, right? It would, like, understandably so, right? And this
Mhm.
is what people would always kind of like fear monger bridging, and like rightfully so at the time. I mean, like, what was it, 2 years ago? You had
Yeah.
you had a really strong argument against bridging. You had wormhole, you had what, multi-chain or
Mhm.
multi-bridge, right? Like you had all of these like catastrophic bridging errors, right? Um, and you know, I haven't thought about it enough, but like I don't know why. Maybe like, are we just good now? Like, did we just get better, all of us collectively? But like this, and not only has that not been a problem, maybe knock on wood, because actually some of these designs are
Yeah.
still
Mhm.
absolutely terrifying. Um, I think the real thing was no longer like the biggest feedback I've gotten from like users is quite literally the best way someone described it was, I don't have time to get worried anymore. Like they literally don't have time to get scared.
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, and that's what makes it now feel like a swap. They're not scared when they go buy a token on Uniswap, right? As long as the transaction clears, you're only scared about a failed transaction. And there's really no failed transactions in bridging. It's actually a more pleasurable experience, right?
Mhm.
And this isn't just intense either. I think a lot of these messaging protocols got, I don't know how or what they did, right? But a lot of them, I mean, I remember using at least like, some of these things where they would still take 15 minutes, right? Today, like, I mean, Stargate V2, right? Layer zero V2 has the fast one where you can pay a little bit more, right? Mayans super fast today.
Mhm.
Mayans, CCTP, what do you mean, right? That was a huge game changer.
Yeah.
So I think it's gotten to the point where it no longer needs to be as terrifying as it once was, I think.
Yeah, and it's a great place to be there after 4 or 5 years, right? Like, because we've been talking about these things, and now finally we're there. So hopefully we can like build on this, and I think we will. Like, there's no reason to think otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is like I think all of this is this is the natural evolution of the, the arc and the development of essentially what became like the ecosystem of Uniswap indexes, right? Because
Mhm.
I believe these things don't all die, all these chains, uh, it's swaps and bridges become one, I think, you know what I mean, to some extent.
And
And
like
this,
on the point of like maturity, I feel Interop is now well and truly in its maturity phase, which I think basically means consolidation towards the edges. Like, I feel in the early days, because there were a lot of participants and the space grew in general, right? So even by participating, there was some false sense of like product market fit because everyone would see volumes, but that doesn't happen anymore. I feel like distribution is the name of the game, and good enough is actually not good enough anymore. And there are specialist teams, and then there are like giants on the other side of that. So specialists, I mean, like Relay, Gas.zip, like you guys actually dominate intents and on aggregators as well. Like, you're winning all the orders pretty much. And then on the other side, there's infra giants, which I think of like Layer Zero, Wormhole, Chainlink, LI.FI to some extent, because like we're neither a bridge nor like a platform. But from that perspective, I feel like these teams sort of have distribution and network effects, and they have like just the footprint across the ecosystem is just massive at this point, right? And then you have like the no man's land in the middle, where all of these teams have kind of found themselves in, not by their own fault, but because like everybody else kind of shifted towards the edges, and these teams have no traction, probably running out of funding soon. And I think they're like ideal prime targets for acquisitions, which we've started to see happen at this point, with
and that makes a
like
lot of sense too, right? I
yeah.
mean, this is still such a small-ish kind of, comparatively, right? How many teams are building dexes? How many people are just building perp dexes alone in the last 3 months, right? There's like, I don't know, a dozen bridge
Mhm.
teams, really, kind of, right? But yeah, you're right. I think there's a handful of products that, I mean, a year ago, you could kind of get away with marketing yourself enough to get users bridging the 12 majors at like a not that competitive price, but not that far away that anyone really noticed. And you would do these incentive campaigns and points and come do volume and etc. Right. And like today that doesn't work. Like
Mhm.
you say, like good enough is not like it's good. It's because anyone who really bridges today is kind of smart enough to use an aggregator now, right? They're using aggregators. And everyone kind of knows that, like, you know, eventually they realized they were getting farmed, I think, on a lot of these things, right? And they were. And like, and this is how markets mature. It makes sense, and like, it should, right? But there's a lot of people or a lot of projects still, maybe a dozen or so, right? Yeah, they're bridging the 12 majors, and they're doing it at like 80 bips more expensive than the worst quote on Jumper,
Mhm.
and it's just like, I don't know how you survive, right? Like,
But there's no future for that. So I think they're just
yeah,
like buying time or passing time, I would say. And they will get acquired at some point, or they will just shut down. Like, it's a bear market. There is no capital, or like at least easy capital, right? So they're not going to raise another round. And you've been here much longer than me, so you know how this plays out.
yeah, I mean, or I mean, I think there's probably some of them that somehow, still have some user base capture just by nature of they're comfortable, they've been using it for years, etc. Right? Like, there's a world where it becomes a small revenue sustaining business, until that, that doesn't last forever either, right? But I can see some of these guys having, 5 years of, they make, $1 million a year, right?
Mhm.
On just the the long tail people who are, what's the meme, the Japanese soldier or whatever, like,
Like,
yeah, they're still
somebody
going
needs
to
to
this.
tell them that the war is over.
Yeah, yeah, they're still going to the 2012 bridge, right? And they're paying 160 bips to bridge from Arbitrum to base. Why?
Mhm.
Because that's all they know and they're comfortable with it. More power to them, maybe, right? Eventually, someday they'll figure it out. But yeah, no, these you're seeing it directly in volumes, right? You look at that kind of like middle part of the chart. like in like a DeFi llama like volume in bridges, right? And you're starting to see you know, condense all in that same kind of spot, and they all kind of have the same amounts of volume, and it's just getting a bit smaller and a bit smaller and a bit smaller, right? They're not expanding, they're not competitive. I mean, you have to expand, you have to be competitive, right? I mean, I think at
Mhm.
least that come to find out, it seems like most of the volume is going through bridges that aggressively expand and are hyper competitive on their quoting, right? And
Yeah,
integrations like ecosystem development and stuff, right? That's, I think, you know, a huge thing is can you get distribution out into in all these aggregators and integrations and wallets and products, etc.
which is super hard because like at this point everybody has a foothold somewhere, right? Like I feel like LI.FI has 1,000 integration partners at this point.
Yeah.
So like we touch wallets, we touch like applications, we touch front ends at this point. Like look at all the different front ends of like Polygon Angler, Arbitrum's native bridge. Like they're all
I looked
powered
on
by
chain the
LI.FI.
other day. It was because they're all tagged like in the transactions, right? I like parsed them the other day. I went through it. I mean, I just have a massive list of. I didn't even. I honestly, I don't know half of them. You know, like it's like, but oh yeah, the amount of things that Levi's like integrated in, right? You know, and I bet a bunch of. I mean, I imagine a ton of them are without your, you know,
Yeah, like we don't even
area to
know
go.
some
It's an
of these.
API. Yeah, some of these guys just plug in. You're like, oh, sick. I'm getting like volume from like this, rogue chain, like marketplace or whatever happens, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's like uh, I think that is. I think if you don't have that, that might be a sole factor in surviving in death in the long run too, right? I don't know how
Mhm.
you will survive without drinking at least a little bit from that spout, you know?
Makes sense. And I think another point that actually signals that we're now entering the maturity phase is basically all of these teams are expanding horizontally as well, right? So if you look at swaps as a market, like we were talking about this with the bridging like comparisons, but every bridging team at this point has swaps as well. Like LI.FI has had swaps for 4 years, Relay has swaps, and I think so my thesis is that like in the beginning days, we basically added a couple of aggregators, like DEX aggregators, to combine bridging and swapping, right? But then after a point when you actually scale to 60 plus chains, all of these aggregators did not keep up with this like chain expansion. So we had to go and like
Becomes your
integrate.
job to keep up with
It
the
became
deployment
our
and the
job to like, yeah, like go figure out what's the native dex on
yeah.
that new chain, and then keep doing this for like 50 plus chains, right? So at this point I would say like our tech is better in terms of swap aggregation than all of these incumbent like dex aggregation players.
Yeah, yeah. And even with that, right? Like I might try to think of even no. I use no, I kind of I mean Llama Swap was always my go-to, right? Like always,
Mhm.
right? For the longest time. But today I shove almost whatever I can, through Jumper. It's the easiest. But and I was saying is even with that, so like I do think you actually probably have the deepest level of DEX aggregation, right? But particularly for new chains. For new chains, absolutely, right? You might be the only people that
I
currently
mean,
still aggregate some of these old ones too. Like
new chains are
CeeLo.
out of
Yeah.
the question at this point. Like if
Oh
you
yeah.
look at Monad launch, how many dex aggregation players were actually there? There was no
Well,
one there.
the what I was going to say to that, even with you being probably the most sophisticated DEX aggregation currently, specifically talking new chains right now, it's still not perfect. It's hard as hell. It's like like I'll occasionally stumble upon some like weird route myself where I'm like, oh hey, I end up with like 20 more USDC when I go this way, right? And like
Mhm.
nobody will ever route me that way. Why? I don't know, because this pool popped up like 70 or whatever, right? For whatever reason, right? Or someone just didn't think of it, integrate it, etc. It's like even I mean, we had thought about doing this for a long time, right? And it is it feels like an impossible task. Like to
Mhm.
constantly it's not only stay up to date with all the DEX deployments and the this and the that and all the chains, right? You then like sure you can like kind of automatically and like autonomously, but like at the same time, I find these routes and like no DEX will aggregate them. Why? I don't really know, but like I mean, the amount of places that these things can cross, right? Like becomes astronomical, particularly now when you're talking something like you guys, where uh at some point, by the way, was weird thing was, we crossed this point in bridging where all chains began to cross, where that wasn't
Mhm.
always the case, right? It used to be like you could bridge from like ETH to like X chain, but like there wasn't any like X chain back to ETH, right? Now any chain listed on Jumper crosses for the most part, right? With every other
Mhm.
chain. And the amount of unique routes that now exist between all this stuff, like, yeah, it makes sense that like sometimes like for whatever reason, I mean, it's impossible to always. What is the newest best, USDC from Kronos to Arbitrum? Who like it, who I don't envy that whoever does that at your team and the guys that do that at your team, and it feels impossible. However, I do think actually you said like we're at the point where good enough like isn't good enough. Uh, for deck swaps, actually, I think that is kind of like good enough is because the counter is like, yeah, I'm like saving like $4 if I do
Mhm.
this like other course, right? So like, and nobody is doing the alternative, which is just, yeah, monad launches, go aggregate like there's like 9 decks, man, right? You guys like put it there. And like, you have to like put this in a thing. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be like, I need to approve a contract. It's terrifying. Um, so I do think like good enough is good enough, right? Because
Mhm.
but all I'm saying is in the long run, it's still, it feels like an impossible task. I
Yeah.
don't know actually how you perfect that in the long run.
But that's like a constant thing. But I think directionally again, interop teams are expanding horizontally, and swaps have now become standard. I think Stargate also has fast swaps, and I think that there's another product category called Earn. Like you basically show users yield opportunities. I think that's
Mm.
coming up. Like Wormhole has it, Jumper is working on it, and there's like a bunch of other teams because this is like the DeFi merit thesis, right? So it's
I
another
would love yield to come back, please,
yeah.
please. Let's bring yield farming
No,
back,
so
right?
so it is coming back, and especially for interop teams, I think that's another interesting category because they at least their front ends are turning more into like everything at one place thing, like bridging, swapping, and then earning as well. Especially for like DeFi
Yeah,
activities, it just makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a. I mean, this is. It becomes a convincing the whole new generation that like yield exists and yield is a thing, right? And maybe rightfully so. I mean, I feel like the last generation has a bad maybe taste in their mouth from some of this yield, right? A la Terra and like Anchor. Like, they came into crypto and we're like, hey guys, 20% free money, go buy a house, right? And then they lost all their money. Like in
Mhm.
DeFi summer, that didn't really happen. We just like got perpetually rugged, but on a really short term basis. And like you knew that was part of the game. This was, catastrophically different, right? But I would love to because it does. I mean, it is true, right? Like yield exists. Yield exists in the real world, right? It's a fundamental part of a financial a credit in system. It's out there. I think people are terrified of it, somewhat rightfully so. But I think there are, responsible things you could point people in
Mhm.
the direction of today, right? That are real and conservative, right? I think it was broad stroke, right? We say today, like anyone tries to give you 20% of your stable coins, like,
Don't take it.
no, like you kind of want to be floating around the Ave rate, Are they
Yeah.
like a point above Ave? Like, okay, yeah, you're probably like death pooling some part of it for like, half the day or whatever. And if you're willing to, you're okay with that, you're good, right? But yeah, and it makes sense because I think uh bridging is like the first step into obviously using any of these chains, right? So I
Mhm.
think a lot of bridges kind of once they got to the point where they're like, oh, I have people coming to this application, I have them bridging. Wait, I'm like driving you to the destination and then I just leave.
Because
Like,
you can see the data, right? Like, okay, people are bridging, and then what are they doing after that? So
mhm.
it kind of makes sense. Like, okay, do this on the same interface, and I think because like these teams have built a brand and a reputation, and like the execution, they've shown that they can execute, right? So they have a very good chance to actually establish themselves even in other niches. And obviously, like not every team can do it really well, but I think they're in with the shout.
Yeah, bridging is one of the few things actually that I think is a good point. I think there's a handful of things. Perp decks, I think some perp deck teams like started showing.
Mhm.
There's a handful of products, right? But yeah, it's. I mean, if you don't execute it, like, and it's not good, it just doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
There's no way getting around it. Whereas with like Dexes, that's not really true. Like you can like just like fork pancake swap, like really low effort. Right? You ever gone to something and then like I'll go to the pools, right? I'm like, how is there $730 million in these pools, right? Um, and it's like, did they do? I don't know. It's probably like one guy that just like deployed a fork, right? Um, so I do think actually the teams that are still around, like doing this type of stuff, like I think Relay is really good, right? I think they're gonna have a, a large lane and then the swapping and kind of we bring you, we're like an Uber driver. I bring you to your destination and then I just leave. And it's like, wait, but like, why don't I like also guide you to do the thing that you want to do once you get there, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it's also all the bridges have that infrastructure laid, right? A lot of it is just base infrastructure, right? Like
I think people
deploying.
miss that point. Like, how many teams in crypto can actually do things on 50 plus chains?
It's a nightmare. It's like that becomes like a large part of the gig of the job here, right? And it,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's like not a problem, right? I mean, not a problem, but it sounds like, oh, this is like, okay, I understand how like, maintaining one network works. Like I just do it with all these different RPCs and these different, that like every chain behaves differently, right? For whatever reason, it makes no sense either, right? But every OP stack L2, they behave differently for whatever reason, right? Because there's a different primary RPC provider for the public one, right? And like occasionally, it's just like there's a million edge cases, and maintaining that in the long run, and you have to because like otherwise, you essentially just have a cliff for your user,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Merlin chain had an update yesterday, right? You bridge there, your money just went to Abyss for 18 hours, right? And it's like, well, you gotta like go figure out that you have to like know this is happening. You have to like disable the route. You have to go do all this, right? You have to update the RPC when it happens. If you're running your own node, you have to run a lot of this infrastructure. It's like, yeah, as soon as I think this is also part of going back to the earlier thing of some guys that do kind of the middle chains, target. I don't necessarily blame them because like that those are the reliable, robust networks that you don't really have too much of these behavioral problems with. As soon as you start expanding out there, that becomes arguably. I feel like most of our job is network maintenance and like you know and learn. You have to learn the chain, right?
Mhm.
Like every chain's different. You have to like learn what happens, how fast these transactions actually land, right? Everyone says stuff, right? What happens when you skip a nonce? What happens, oh, guess what? This like RPC, sometimes it just returns zero. Why? I don't know. Ask the team. They don't know. It's just like, that's what it is, right? Okay. Like handle that, account for it. And I used to tell people, and in our regard, at least, I think we only started getting really reliable maybe about 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And I feel like I look back at it and I'm like, oh, we could just like build this, right? And in reality, it just took 2 months, year and a half, 2 years of fumbling live order flow. And I don't know any other way. If you like wanted to build it, I'd be like, you just like kind of got to go out there and like drop the orders and like
Mhm.
then figure out why you dropped the order. And then that thing and you build into your system. And like, I think that's actually what a solver really is today, right? Is some massive system that handles all of this across hundreds and hundreds of chains, right? Um, but yeah, it's a nightmare. And I don't think it gets better, right? Like,
Yeah, it's a never ending problem, which is why like I want to talk about the state of bridges today, right? So I think so intense for retail, like I think that debate is done and dusted. Like intense for
yeah,
retail order flow is the best way to go about it. And I think intents have also done really well to kind of beef up the order flow they can consume, right? So I think at one point people would talk about intents as a great solution for like $1,000 order flow, maybe up something up till like 10,000. But today you can easily send 100K, 200K across chains.
you can send millions.
You can send millions across like majors,
You,
majors.
2 million.
Mil-
Yeah, millions was maybe a little aggressive,
yeah,
but yeah, no,
yeah,
like you can send $1 million, like and get like
exactly.
almost near immediate settlement on primary major chains, like for sure, not a problem.
So
Liquidity exists.
intense for retail, and then there's like mint and burn tech for the whales and for like rebalancing, and actually rebalancing intense as well. So USDT zero, CCTP, and all the other tokens that have been like minted that have been issued on token standards, like you can use those tokens, right? And I
Mhm.
think like we've settled into a pattern at this point where I can actually say that this is true and this is how it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's I think yeah, this is what played out I think this is kind of what we thought would play out, but like it's like actually played out, right? So
Hmm.
and even from just like anecdotal like talking to people experience, right? Even actually in the kind of 100K ish plus ballpark, right? People will go use like CCTP.
Hmm.
Like usually like someone's bridging like 500K to ARB, they're like somewhat knowledgeable enough to like know that like, hey, there's like a 20-second settlement like by the guys who made the damn stable coin, right? Like I'll go do this and it's free, right? Rather than, going through one of these intents because all this stuff still also, there are still hiccups, right? All of us relay across, you can always get, I had a slow fill on a cross the other day. It tilted me so hard, right? There's still always hiccups. It is dependent on available liquidity, right? So like mint and burn is like, I think mint and burn was like, I don't know if chains would survive, if we would have like a L2 slash the like chain ecosystem that we do today. Not because we have mint and burn today, but also because like, I think we knew this was an ultimate destination. Like CCTP kind of laid the way, right? And we were like, surely we can do this. It kind of like took some time
I
to like
mean,
actually
I,
go and
I
do it.
think like we only solved this because we took chains out of the picture, right? Like now it's an asset issuer
Yeah.
issue to tackle basically. Like you can just expand to new chains. Like no new chain is out of bounds basically, and you can expand CCTP to any new chain. You can take USDT zero to any layer zero supported chain, right? So chains are out of the question. So mint and burn is actually not new tech. Like the native
Well,
bridges were always built this way. We're just using it differently now.
I think the part that was new to it that I think I find valuable at maybe that, and it's a bit different level lane here is, like a Bearer chain where
Mhm.
Bearer is now mint and burnable, right?
Yeah.
Or something that's not a stable coin, right? These like non-stable coins being able to, because you like don't need to, a lot of these things, like there'll be a native asset on an L2, it's their gas token, etc. There's no liquidity for it on their L2 because like, why are they going to make people bridge over, right? So like the main liquidity pools, you see this with new chain launch, right? They're on BSC and then
Mhm.
you'll buy the asset and then Stargate OFT it over to the new chain. Mitosis was like this, Somnia was like this, Peak. I think no, not much. There are a handful of things like this, because that's what the liquidity is. Like, okay, why don't we just make the pool in the place where the liquidity already is, right? But that's the native asset, right? So that was like a cool new thing that I think we started seeing in the last like 6 months was the chain's native, you know, not stable coin asset, the
Like
gas asset.
gas token basically.
Yes, yes, and which for the most part is also their token, right? It's
Mhm.
the project's token. That became mint and burnable, right? Which is chain native, and for something like us, and for a lot, even if you are, a regular bridge, that does swaps and etc. Like the ability to bridge the native asset from one place to another is a pretty sick benefit, right? Else I need to have liquidity on that chain to swap it for USDT zero. USDT is great that it's mint and burnt, right? But like, how do I get it? And like
Mhm.
go to some of these places and the slippage and the liquidity, it just doesn't exist, right? Um, on the new, like newly launched L2. Hype had this problem for a long time, right? They had USDT. It took a while for USDT to kind of pass this over there because you'd bridge the UST, then you'd buy Hype, but you'd eat like 5% slippage on it
Mhm.
because the pool just wasn't big yet, right? The liquidity was on the book, on Hypercore. So that was I think the one of the neater burn and mint things that it was. I expected that this should happen in the exact way that you're describing it with stable coins. Once you like really looked at CCTP V1, right? You're like, surely this gets faster, and surely yes, this is like a game of asset issuance. It's irrelevant to like the chains and where they go. It's just you can take this. The issuer can take this thing and go forcefully put it wherever the hell they want if they really want to, in theory, right?
Mhm.
But then some guys came around and were like, actually, let's make our Ethereum an OFT, right?
Yeah. But that's the thing. So I think because of this change, the definition of native bridges has changed totally.
Oh yeah,
Right? Like earlier, it used to be the canonical bridge like L2 to L1. But at this point, all of these assets are powered by token standards, like Interop token standards.
yeah,
So I would say there's no native bridge anymore as like we have come to know it. But at this point, all of these like token standards are taking over like the asset issuance part, and then the aggregators are kind of taking over the native bridge interfaces.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anything outside of, I mean, Actually, I don't think people use the canonicals for them, right? So if ETH is the gas token and it's an OP stack or an Orbit chain, or actually Orbit chains, no, OP stack went to all ETH, right? So if it's an OP stack chain, it
Hmm.
has to be ETH. Orbit chains, they have unique assets, a little bit different. But so there's still some cases, I guess, where, but that's the only place the canonical still exists, even
Yeah, but I'm saying
because
like
they're actually
again,
bridging it. Yeah,
directionally the ball is already rolling. Like it's gonna happen. So basically, like next year when we're
I think
talking,
it happens, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there is no canonical bridge to mitosis. They used
Hmm.
hyperlink, and that was like a unique one, right? They used my
Hmm.
hyperlink for it, right? There is because like mitosis doesn't exist elsewhere either, right? You know, and it's not an E to L2. You know, granted, yeah, I think this like you started seeing this happen, and I think users actually caught on to this like much better than I would have bet that they would have, right? Because it is like an entire kind of 180 of like what we've
Yeah,
told them the entire time. You know what I mean? And we're like, suddenly we're like, listen, guys, no, actually, this new chain's launching, but it's launching in a Binance Smart Chain LP pool. You got to go buy it on Pancake Swap, and you're gonna go to Stargate and bridge it like over to Somnia Chain or whatever. Like, and they're like, okay, yeah, I get it, cool. Oh, okay. Like, yeah, it works a lot. A lot of it too. A lot of that process is done through stuff like a jumper, right? A lot of these guys just
hmm,
go jumper for the most part. You can do the swap, you can do this, and put the CA in, and you can actually just output it on the destination if you guys support it, right? You became the canonical interface, yeah. You know, for a
yeah.
lot of these newly launched chains, I think. Um, so
What do you think about the state of bridges in general? Like there are what 12 bridges live at this point, at least on the liquidity side. So you've had a lot of thoughts on all of these bridges in general. Like how do
yeah.
you rate all of them at this moment? How do you see them?
I would try bridge right all the time, all day. For the most part, almost all of my quotes, excluding gas myself, right? So I do this rebalancing, right? So I can't rebalance for myself, so I exclude myself. For the most part, almost all of my orders are going through uh if it's direct, it's relay and Mayan,
Hmm.
for sure. And then probably about a third I go manually through Stargate, but I do like a hop, meaning it's something like a like a mantle. I get a better price on mantle if I like sell mantle on a native dex for USDC on mantle, and then fast bridge on Stargate that USDC from mantle over to, and that's not an OFT, right? I take slippage. I eat slippage. It's using like the old like Stargate liquidity pools, right? Um, but between relay, Mayan, and Stargate, I don't really. I'll use some like long tail stuff. You can kind of take advantage of some of these middle guys that we were talking about before that haven't updated some routes and like pricings and like exit prices and fees, right? So occasionally use some of those, right? But I think we're doing an EVM chain for the most part. Relay or us at a smaller level. Like, I mean, it's just we're going to be the best pool for the most part. Across existence up there, but Across has
Hmm.
a significantly smaller chain offering, so you just don't see the name pop up as much with kind of the chains that are happening today, right? And like, yeah, they're on Monad, right? Okay, they like went live on Monad like I don't know, 12 hours like later, right? And it's just like you've missed the like kind of
The
getting
initial wave.
yeah, user goes to bridges the first time, right? They see like three bridges, and that's what they remember kind of too, right? Yeah, for the most part, I think it is beginning to consolidate between, and like Mayan specializes in essentially all non EVMs, not
Hmm.
even non EVMs, like non ETH EVMs. So it always gives me the best route kind of for like a BSC, an AVAX, like native, right? I want to go like ETH to AVAX, ETH in, AVAX out. Like Mayan for the most part, Swift will give me the best route for a bunch of this stuff. Um, that's like kind of my starter kit today. I like
Hmm.
really don't use too many of Eco is showing up now and I'm starting to do stable coins,
Yeah.
right? That's gonna show up a bit as some of my best quotes, right? But other than that, like
And
what else
I
do you
think
use?
like whatever you're saying actually checks out with our data as well, just in terms of order flow, right? So it's not just you, it's literally like let's say hundreds of thousands of users and like millions in order flow, and the data literally fragments this way. Like the top dogs are the top dogs for a reason, and then for some reason, like all of the others just haven't kept up.
Yeah, and like I don't know if it's a game of they're happy to take smaller order flow because they charge like older, higher spreads and like they're not confident in their ability to, they have their pricing right,
Mhm.
start becoming competitive. They have to double their order flow to start making the same amount of money. Maybe they're just like, the hell with it, like I'm happy to charge my 100 bips. I'm going to have 1/4 the flow of everybody else, but I'm making 4 times. This is some of the kind of the theory that we do on some of the long tail chains, right? Um, but yeah, and this only really kind of started happening again, like the second half of this year, I think. You started really seeing it, right? And it was chain coverage got broad.
Mhm.
I think usage of things like a jumper became and was a significant part of it. Um, I still hear people that are like, I use D-Bridge to bridge to Solana, and I'm just like, I can show you 2 dozen bridges that give you a better quote. It's you've used eBridge to bridge from EVM to Solana, and like rightfully so, they've got that. They were one of the first people to offer that route, so they've
Mhm.
like purchased some level of that mind share and users, and it's fast, and they're happy with it, right? But you're paying 60 bips or whatever the hell it is, right? It's just like it's ridiculous. Um, so a small handful of us, I think, like it's a race to zero. I think is another part of one of your topics, right? Is it's
Mhm.
a lot of these things with volume. It's a very quick race to zero. For the most part, majors you get bridge for free today, instantly, better than the canonical. Uh, but everyone expanded coverage. Everyone started competing. I think you like a jumper started making everybody actually compete with each other. It was like
Yeah.
harder to directly compete, right? Because we'd write our own, like kind of look at everyone's pricing. But this is sick, right? I can see exactly where we are, like in line and where you have to be to compete. And I mean, it's bad for bridging, right? We say bridging's a bad business, right? It's bad for us in the long run. Functionally, it's good for you at the same time because this is a good product.
Yeah.
You don't
I think
want to be ripping the face off of a user and fees. Like we are all building a better every time we bring the fee bip down, like we are delivering the user a better product, a better
there,
every
there's that thing, right? Like competition is bad for business, but it's good for the market. So like it's good for the
yes,
users, but like
yes.
it's bad for people who are running these businesses because that means you don't have a monopoly, right? And Jumper literally just I kind of think it's like the airline business where the provider does not matter, right? Like it's just another service provider coming in. Like it doesn't matter if my orders are routed through whoever. And if one player goes out tomorrow, there'll be another one taking their place. So it is like the
I think
airline
that's a recent
business.
development too, though, for what it's worth. I think 6 months
Okay.
ago, it kind of did matter because,
Mm.
again, these like 5 or 6 that we're talking about now, I
But
think we
that's what I'm
all
saying.
have
So like
an
top
equal level
five
of
or
reliability.
six. Top
Yes.
five or six, yeah.
Yes.
Other than
They've
that, like
all
don't use
become
anything.
equally comfortable, reliable, delivery speed, right? They all still have hiccups. We all still fail, right? But we kind of fail at the same rate. I don't know, one in every 50 orders or something, right? Gets reverted for whatever reason it is. It's like, whereas before it was,
Yeah,
sometimes you get
there
thrown
was just
somewhere.
like a big difference in quality and
Yeah.
reliability and like
Mhm.
speeds and everything. But now everything is, I think the standard has gone up, and whoever can maintain that standard, like they are in that league where it doesn't matter who you route through. You're gonna get like a reliable service, good quotes, good timing, and like 99.9% of the times your orders are gonna go through.
Yeah. And for what's worth, that's why I think at some point I'm gonna without building Jumper, at some point I would go to Jumper and it would look more like what's that Solana one, Titan? Use like Titan exchange, Titan swap. Um, at some point I go to Jumper and like, don't even show me these routes, right? Just this is the bridge, right? And you just give me don't let me choose because we're at the point, and this wasn't the case when you built Jumper, right? There
Yeah,
was such a difference in quality, pricing, etc. At this point, you're showing me like 5 options that are like different by half a penny. To the extent that rounding doesn't even matter, like they all look identical. They all have identical delivery times, identical everything, right? And that's only because everything, right? So now
yeah.
you don't
We're,
even
we're
really
getting
need to
there. We're
expose
getting
that.
there. We're getting
Yeah,
there. We're still at a point where people like to see the different codes because, like,
sure.
in their mind, it's reinstating the fact that they're getting the best prices, right? Because then they're thinking, oh, why are they quoting Gas.zip? Like, maybe relay could have been better, right? So this just takes that out of the picture. But I think we're probably getting there.
You gotta invent some words like the Solana guys did, like just in time swapping or just quoting, right? I was like, oh, you mean you just give the best quote before you execute? Like this is what we all do internally, at least. Like okay, yeah, just in time quoted, cool, we do that.
But I think so this year. there was another chain that just kind of started coming at the top of like order flow, right? So Hyperliquid was the story of this year.
Sure.
Last year it was Solana, and I think every year there are opportunities like this in Interop
Mhm.
where a new bridge provider or somebody can actually come up and make the most of these chains popping up and actually get back their market share, right? So I think, like you mentioned, dbridge did a great job just positioning themselves with Solana because they were early, and Hyperliquid actually presented that same opportunity. And instead of a single player this time, I would say there were three or four players because the space has become so competitive that we're able to take this opportunity.
Yeah, it was a huge. Yeah, it was probably the in 2025. I'm trying to think if there was anything that I would even
No,
have.
that Hyperliquid has had billions in volume. There's been
Yeah, but we're
nothing.
talking even in just kind of like in sentiment, like mind share, people talk, right? Yeah, yeah. I think it, and then the metrics do some match
Yeah,
to that extent, right? Yeah, and it was if you in the beginning, nobody touched it. In like beginning, and rightfully so. We've had this conversation. There was no infrastructure, right?
yeah.
Once that existed, like I was looking at like hypercore quotes on Jumper today, right? It's one of the most broad covered routes on Jumper. I think 12 different providers quote you going into hypercore.
That's because our PM is a Hyperliquid.
I know. He's great. He's great. He's great. He should be getting a check from Hyperliquid. That's for damn sure. Um, but no, it's true. It doesn't matter how much you get, right? These bridges still need to be willing to capitalize USDC on Hypercore and like
Mhm.
offer this like this route, and it's one of the most deep routes and unique, chain offering. Um, this was, and then Hyper EVM obviously too, right? Became once everyone kind of figured that out, that became because it became somewhat of a stepping stone into core. It had its own time and season, right? And when it had its own time and season, it was hot. It was popping. That was for sure.
But the thing is, like, if you actually think about it, there not every Interop team was able to capitalize on this.
No,
If you properly think about it, the same five or six names will come to your mind, and you'll be like, okay, there's a reason why there's like different categories in Interop at this point, where some are ahead compared to the others, right?
sure.
And another story this year was Near Intense. I think like they had an interesting go-to-market approach. Like I don't
Mhm.
think I saw that coming, but they were able to get like
Definitely didn't see that coming.
order flow, mind share. Like they were up there for 2 months probably.
They're still up there. I think they make them
Yeah.
150, 100,000, 150,000 day in fees or something last I
So
checked.
so
Like it
so
was
that
still
means there is still space for new players every year,
sure.
but maybe like one and not like three or four anymore.
Yeah, and like I meant to like actually go and look at it. I would imagine a lot of the volume comes from things like a Zcash, right?
Mhm.
The Zcash swaps there. Their quotes are wide. I will tell you on everything else, their quotes are wide. They're not competitive on like traditional EVM swaps, right? To
Mhm.
go eat the ARB or wherever, anything else. But they do have again it was like this was kind of my early like go to market play. I was like, I'm just gonna do a bunch of stuff that nobody else is willing to do, and I'm gonna
Exactly.
cross a bunch of these routes. And like, yeah, it's hard, it's pain in the ass, right? And from their hard and pain in the ass is that they have these NPC wallets. You have to like the funds in EBS, custom escrowed it, and it's pain in the ass, right? But that allows them now to like they can cross like Zcash to Sui, right?
Mhm.
It enable they can do Dogecoin to Cardano, right? Like these
Yeah.
things are just like these didn't exist, and yeah, more power to them to be able, right? But
But like
I don't know how many
interestingly,
people
these
talk about.
markets have always existed. Like
Yeah,
look at decentralized exchange volumes, right? Like everybody's buying Cardano. So
sure.
why not make it on chain? Like why not have
Yep,
these markets on chain? So I think more power to them. Like their GTM was actually interesting and unique and it did see usage.
sure. And I think a lot of this depended on their like NPC stuff, which I knew they were working on for a long time, right? That was like a long feat in coming. And honestly, I like give them like hell yeah for that. It's like you like spent like 2 or 3 years like building this kind of unsexy, difficult piece of like infrastructure that nobody. I only kind of recently figured out what like actually like NPC like wallets do and stuff, right? Like nobody knows, users don't care, right? But it now unlocks this, right? And like now it's paying off for that. So like Hell yeah, right? Rarely does I think that happen. Somebody grinds on a piece of really boring, unpopular infrastructure, and suddenly you're spitting out $1 million a week, right, in profit because
Mhm.
everyone's doing their thing. Um, you know, uh, Functionally speaking, I think like the team is, you know, directionally correct. Directionally, I think, particularly if it continues to print money, right? Like this should become a really good thing. There are paths to, this is how I see us, this is how I see relay, right? There's a state of where it is today, but I think if the people, you know, are directionally correct with, you know, how they want it to grow, things they want to cover, the things they want to do, and the incentives align for them to do that, right? The bridge is
Mhm.
profitable, or they have users, they have whatever. Like we have answers to this stuff. It's just again probably another grind, like similar to that NPC thing, right? It's a grind of building out some like really not fun and attractive and user facing things that eventually allow us to, you know, we need trustless bridging in the long run, right? And that's what, and there are some, actually, that's the point of the guys that are kind of in the middle that are like dying with the 12 chains. None of them, I think, had to have or care about a credible path to being anything other than what they currently are, right? Everyone else is trying at least to, you like go and you talk to these guys, right? You want to integrate with them, right? They kind of give you, oh, hey, this thing's going to change. We're going to redeploy this thing, right? Like you talk to them, it's like, oh, they're trying to cook something here, right? And like we all kind of know there might be answers, right? But it's gonna take some trial and error along the way, right? But like Orbiter, I don't think Orbiter becomes trustless. They just like said they were trustless and like they like pretend to release their market making application. Like it's just like they don't care. They're never going to be trustless, right? They make their money and they're happy about it, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, but like I think the main takeaway from the near intense story, at least from a high level like state of interop, I think there are still opportunities,
Oh yeah.
and there will always be space for new players. So that was my takeaway from that story.
Yeah. I mean, it's we've all thought about it, right? And nobody knew how to approach it. Nobody. I think you have to do exactly what you did there, and if you want
Just
to do it,
just just go for the market, I guess.
yeah. It, for what it's worth, when was Zcash? I don't know how they made Zcash. This we can't like look back with the foresight, like, oh man, like how did nobody go for the Zcash market, right?
Yeah.
There was no Zcash market 2 months ago, so there's some credibility in our ballpark for that. You know, what's the sure, does Cardano have a market? I don't know. Sure, there's volumes. I never bet a Cardano. I mean, sure, a taxi driver out. So granted, but yeah, apparently it exists.
Yeah.
Apparently so. That's my learning from that too.
Okay. Last segment. I want to talk about solver economics, something that we've talked about a lot.
Mm,
And the general consensus has always been that solvers are a winner takes all sort of a market. And at this point, we have the data to back this, right? Like, there's no denying this anymore. There's no mental gymnastics about like decentralization, whatever, right? Like, we know that top three, top five solvers will always dominate a marketplace, and the data for across shows that, the data for car swap shows that. So it's not even just in the bridging space, right? Like I think it's just a design uh, outcome at this point. I think interestingly, like so Sprinter has this research piece that
yeah.
they published like 2 3 months ago, right? So one of the points that actually stood out for me was that they think access actually matters more than building the best solver in the market at this point, which I think is correct, because like when you're competing with other solvers, sure, then engineering matters more, right? But at this point, I don't think solvers are actually looking for like competition. They're basically looking for exclusivity from like a marketplace perspective, like guarantees that they will win certain order flows. I think that's a fair representation of where the solver market stands right now. But like obviously, like you're someone who's running a solver, so I would love your expert opinion on this.
Well, I don't know if we're much of experts at anything, but you know, so I'm not sold that this was like the old argument of when like chain abstraction people to some extent were kind of like, oh, we'll just build our own in-house solver. And then they did
Mhm.
it and they shipped it and it was like something on 3 chains with $7,000 in liquidity and just users constantly running into. So I'm not sold on the idea that like I think there are a lot of people who have access and distribution and for whatever reason or not, right, are not solving order flow, are shipping it out somewhere else, right, externally. And for what for the reason anyone can kind of, put something together and start delivering transactions, right?
Oh, so when I say access, I don't mean access for like in-house order flow. So I mean like, let's say you're a third-party solver, so you have to be in touch with like
uh,
this team and basically get access to their order flow. So it doesn't have to be an in-house solver.
uh, yeah, I think the real issue with that today is that the largest portions of the order flow are going to teams that have privatized, internalized solving currently, right?
Mhm.
And will that change in the long run? Sure, absolutely, right? But how do you go right now? How do you go to access relays order flow? You can't, right? You could be the best solver, and you could have all the liquidity. You could be the best, like you can't, right? You can go compete with a cross. And actually, can you? I don't know. You got to go do the GitHub issue exclusive relay or blah blah blah. So you can be good. Uh, I don't know where you solve today if you're a solver, to be honest with you. This is like, if you're a willing solver, where do you go and solve today as a bridge? Like, where would you go?
I mean, honestly, like a biased answer, but probably LI.FI intents.
Okay, sure.
Because we don't
Uh,
have our own solver. That's
sure,
like we don't have a horse in the race.
sure. Okay. The number one distribution app that just shipped this. Yes. Okay, yes. There might be a place for the solver to go and start solving some order flow. Sure. Where would
Two
you have
months
gone
from now.
4 months ago? Where would you have gone 6 months ago or 2 months ago? Right? Like everybody's is so I don't know where you even get that access, right? Like the
Yes.
hard part here wasn't the hard by sure technology, engineering, solving this, that. There's also just some hard part of it was getting that order flow funneled to a certain thing, right? Which is gas or relay or cross or orbiter or whoever, right? Part of the battle there was track, and it's valuable, right? And in
Mhm.
the long run, do I think everyone wants to internalize that? Like, no, right? There will be a world where exactly this, right? Other solvers should be able to come in and do this type of stuff, right? Um, but in that world where that happens, then I think if you have ability to access that order flow, then you are going to have to be hyper competitive, right? And so this like, the solver maybe doesn't matter as much. I think we actually probably saw this play out in the early days of Cross when they didn't have exclusive fills, when everyone was just firing failed transactions trying to fill. And
Mhm.
for the first probably 2 months, everyone just used the default like across like example relayer that they published, solver on, I get right. And then suddenly they all woke up one day and were like, whoa, I didn't fill a damn order overnight. What happened? And it's like, oh yeah, some guy rewrote it and he's 5 times more efficient than you now, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. I think, no, and then not only that, you start solving and you go back into the main thing of it's just as soon as you start dropping orders, you're screwed, right? Not only you're not going to get it, no one's going to trust. It's just, but it is true that having access, maybe I agree with that, but having access is you can like kind of solve the tech problem if you like really need to, right?
Mhm.
Having access is a really hard problem to solve, I think.
But think about it from like a market maker's perspective, right? Like they actually only care about access at this point because they want guarantees over order flow that they will at least get a chance to like fill it, right? So from that perspective, I think this is just becoming more of a trend where access to order flow is super important to onboard new solvers, and that's again going to be another factor that contributes to like a winner take all sort of a market, if you don't want to call it like a centralizing factor, but at least a factor where the top solvers in any marketplace win the most order flow. So I think that's just going to be the reality of like intent based marketplaces and solvers in these marketplaces, where maybe 3 to 5 at most is the ideal number of solvers that you need in the marketplace.
Yeah, I agree with this. And then my like theoretical meta thought on this is that actually it's just going to be the same people that have the order flow today because that is probably ultimately where the order flow is being kicked off to afterwards to rebalance. Which is like kind of exactly what happens behind the scenes, right? So you can be a really good solver, you got, for whatever reason, you have liquidity, you have better this, that, right? Like after you take this 10 ETH in on World Chain, like you probably just go punt it off on a cross or one of these other places, right? And then like ultimately that's, so I, how that plays, right? And then like, okay, there's a guy, it's essentially a guy sitting in the middle here, charging a spread to form.
Maybe there's a netting layer that comes up at some point. Like it's not there right now. Everclear has been trying to set it up, but like maybe at some point it does make sense, right?
Yeah, I think we have the best netting system in the world, and it's across protocol and relay protocol. That's essentially where everyone nets through today, more or less, right?
Mhm.
Unless you have the book. If you have the book, then it does kind of eventually trickle its way to a small handful of bridges that have a bunch of dormant ETH on hand and are willing to take the 7-day exit, Um, but yeah, it's I mean, functionally speaking, both are obviously very important, right? You need distribution, you need access, you need flow, you need to be able to do things, right? But at the same time, I don't think anyone is going to succeed without some specialized version of an order filling system, right? Uh, and we've seen this with across, kind of being the example of looking at that and how that behaved over the last 2 years, right? I mean, these guys have sicko stuff. So when I look at these trends, I'm like, I don't even know how they go back a block. What the hell? Like they fill the block, It's just like they do some sick stuff, right? I mean, you look on chain, right? You're just always like, wow, there's wizards out there. But it's both very important. And I don't just say that as obviously, but part of my enterprise value as a corporate relies on the fact that we can reliably deliver transactions across 300 blockchains at the same time.
Yeah.
But like, because I do, believe it to some extent, but also I'd be dead without, you know, having, we built this front end product, 2 years ago at the time we did and offered the chains we did and now have the integrations we have, right? Like, my solver's useless, right? I'm not going to go solve on a cross. Wouldn't even ever be doing this. Most say we don't want to be solvers, but I don't know. I'm also think there's just a future where like third party solvers don't exist and just the people who generate the order flow are going to be the ones who solve it.
Probably, I think so, and or maybe like exclusive deal flow where you share profits or something of that sort.
Yeah. And just they're going to be like four of them. They all have their own place, kind of like where it is today, where they generate order flow themselves. And then also they say, hey, you can throw me your order flow as well from whatever the hell else you do, whatever application you have. And yeah, I'll give you 20%, whatever it
Mhm.
is, right? Functionally, like, why are you going to, bring in, and it gets stronger as it's exactly what happened to Relay. Relay like woke up one day and they were just like this giant gorilla from a little monkey, and they were like, because the capital just compounds and compounds and order flow compounds, right? And suddenly it's like, if you're an external integrator, you're like, yeah, I want to give all my stuff to Relay because like they got $3 million LPing on Katana chain. You know,
Mhm.
Leader has 50 grand, right? I can fill it, I can offer such a better product and I can quote much higher. And, so granted, I don't know how that plays out. There's also a world we all just, I don't write off the world where we like stop, people just like stop solving. And we do go to some version of a, you know, I don't know, whether it's we have routes between burn and mints that end up working and being able to accommodate these types of things or pool. It's, it just might become an impossible business to run.
Mhm.
And
But
maybe
that's
stupid.
why you internalize it. That's why you internalize it, because like you can take that cost, because like it can be a loss leader from that perspective, because it's a proven model, it works, the UX is great, people want it. So like you just take the hit from that perspective, or like you just don't make money on it, which I think is not even true, right? Like you guys are making money today. So from that perspective, there is
Somewhat.
money to be made. Yeah, there is money to be made, like if you can optimize things.
There's money to be made if you optimize things and if you are like willing to do some of the things the other people don't want to do. Yeah, willing to cross mitosis inbound for you know metas outbound, whatever.
Mhm.
And guess what? Some guy's going to shove $200 a week through it, but that's equal to $10 million of our within value on the
Mhm.
on the fees that everyone else currently charges. So yeah, I don't know. I go back to, I used to run, actually quite parallel to this. The first thing I ever did in crypto was I ran a Bitcoin faucet. Um, and again, it's kind of the same thing. I was like, oh, you have this bot which sends Bitcoin out all day, and the Bitcoin was free, right? But in Google AdSense, the whole thing was, have higher CPMs and the amount of Bitcoin I was giving out, right? I think about that someday. I'm just like, what if you like came and just like I made you do obviously like the survey is the classic thing, right? But whether there's like a creative like version of that today, right? And it's just like I can bridge you for free now.
Mhm.
Like
No, so I mean we've tried it on Jumper basically, but because the bridge transfer times have gone down so much, there is just nothing to do there. Like there is no
yeah,
space.
yeah.
So we've tried this.
I've thought about like imagine like come flip a coin. Come
Yeah.
flip a coin with 41 or 51% house edge, right? Guess what? Lands on heads, your bridge is free. Lands on tails, your fees doubled. Thanks for playing.
With that, you might have doxed where you're from.
I think everyone else, although, come on, you're going to have to hyper optimize your business model to be gambling when Donald Trump provokes all, suddenly we're all going to be turning our business models into versions of gambling.
Mhm.
But no, it's true, right? It's like, okay, at some point, if this all goes to zero, how the hell else do you turn this, what we're doing here, into a profit? And I think that is actually something that I look for. It's like that is like not like a light at the end of the tunnel. You obviously have to like figure it out, right? But that's like I see opportunity there that is not yet solved, right? Nobody's
Mhm.
doing it because you don't have to yet. But at some point, you might have. Maybe you kind of have to for majors. You're not making money on Arbitrum base and OP and wherever.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, how do you sustain offering this service? Because it is a good service, right? People want it. Or are we all going to shut down one day and be like, it's not profitable? Well, then we just start the cycle again. I don't know. But
Well, let's see if we can have answers to those questions in 2026. But that's it for like the state of Interop for going into like 2026. And hopefully, anybody who watches this is as much into the weeds of Interop that we are, so they can like actually understand what we were talking about. But there's going to be a long form article that covers all of these themes, so you
oh
can
yeah,
read in peace.
Arjun's very okay. Summarize. I don't know if it's your article or just this car. Summarize 2026 Interop bridging in like 2 sentences, right? Like just like a review. Imagine you're writing a Yelp review. How would you write a Yelp review for Interop? What happened? What do you think about it?
I
Sure,
think
yeah.
this was the year where interop actually became inevitable. Like you cannot avoid it anymore. It's not a question. Like a lot of the problems are solved. And directionally, the way crypto is going with like new chains, stable coins, and like all of these assets coming on chain, all of this is happening on top of like interop rails, right? So you cannot avoid interop. And I think in 2026, like the thesis of interop and crypto kind of become the same because I feel like without interop, there is no composability, right? And at this point, we've realized that there are going to be multiple chains. So
Mm-hmm.
you basically cannot have hundreds of different ecosystems and like thousands of different assets if there's no composability. So I think without interop, like crypto actually fails because without interop, there's no composability. So there's no way to do this. Interop has to be there, and interop is the thesis of like crypto. Like it's the basis on top of which crypto exists.
Sure. And again, that's a development of what past 5 years.
Exactly.
Before we like have this idea that chains were going to exist alternatively, right? But yeah, I think that's it's. I don't want to say like. I almost want to say like there's still a lot of technical stuff to actually solve with these like intents, making message passing faster, etc. But like we're like, I feel much more closer to like we solved bridging in that people are no longer terrified and say it's find me a guy on your Twitter timeline that will still argue you like bridging sucks. They stopped. They won't necessarily argue bridging is great, but they stopped complaining about it, right? This was the year they finally stopped complaining about it because solutions finally started getting comparable to experiences that they were used to, such as swapping on a Uniswap or swapping on a 1inch, right? And I think that was a huge step one hurdle to making it what you kind of say in your thesis. I think like inevitable, right?
Yeah.
It's just a swap, man, right? It's like actually just a swap today,
Everything is a swap at the end of the day. Like we make up these terms like bridging, swapping, whatever. to give you a mental framework, right? Like a mental model of doing things on different chains. But everything is literally a swap at the end of the day. So I think like those lines are also blurring.
And we never
Where
actually bridged anything, did we? Like even
no,
the canonical
there's
not
been no
bridged.
bridge. There's
There's no
never been a
bridge. Like,
bridge.
canonical not bridge. What it is, you're locking in a multi-sig. It's mint and burn, right? Mint and burn are the
Literally,
closest thing that you
literally.
know. Like, why do we say like we never bridged anything? It even makes sense.
It's a mental model because you're like going from one chain to another and like you connect them through bridges. So
About
technically
road,
there is no bridging.
a road, I don't know, an airplane, a
Yeah.
car, like
So I have an article from like 2023 where I have all of these analogies like roads and everything, but nobody
hell
cares.
yes. Are just like, listen, brother, you're preaching to the choir. I wrote it. Wow, I never like sounds stupid to think about in hindsight, obviously, but I never actually thought about that and at that sort of level. Yeah, we never bridged anything. Bridging
Yeah.
doesn't exist. We're just
It's a
bridging doesn't
mental model.
exist.
It's a mental
Bridging doesn't
model.
exist. Someone else is just swapping for you. Literally,
Maybe not even swapping. Like they're just giving you funds on the other chain.
Bridging, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's like some like GQA to put that in a, like the cloud doesn't exist, just someone else's computer, right? I don't know what it is. The bridge never existed. It's just some guy already crossed the bridge and he's
Yeah.
like, he's teleporting you before I don't know. It's
But
early
yeah,
for me.
we've clearly lost the plot here. But
Yeah.
this is a good point to to end
I
this.
think the point was better. It was good, right?
Yeah, for
You're
sure.
never bridging anything, guys. And I think we finally accepted that. And that's why we have the solutions we have today. And that's why stuff is fast and cheap.
Thanks a lot for your time, and thank you
Thanks for having
to
me. I
anyone
appreciate it,
who watched
guys.
this.
Yes, thank you. Apologies for the end if you have to listen to that, but yeah, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.